Christmas 2022 and New Year's was being spent by the ship's electricians class at Boygun deployed at sea. We would be out for 4 to 5 weeks and gather knowledge and see if we were all about this sea life. Personally, I was aboard the multi-purpose vessel Volantis, which is a ship owned by the company Volstad. The following minutes will give you a general feel of the work at sea, albeit from an electrician's point of view, and some of the things you might come to experience also. I myself was only at sea for 3 days, because Volantis was to be dry docked at Oskov Yard in Frederikshavn in Denmark. So although my seafaring time was limited, my experiences were many. First, get the lockout-tagout order from the bridge, which must be signed. Locate the capacitors, and when located, remove the panels for easier access. Always be sure to make an extra voltage measurement just to be sure. Remove the connections between the faces of the capacitor, and then measure between the faces on the millifarad function on the multimeter. Each capacitor should have at least 47 millifarad. When all the measurements are approved, then put everything back into place and fill out the completed work order. An error message appeared on the UV sterilizer. This is because it needed to be cleaned. The UV sterilizer cleans the water on board and disinfects it. You have to remove the light from the inside of the system and then wash the pipe. As the ETO shows here, it's quite dirty. Then clean the filter as well and test the system. Green means good. This time it was a big boy that needed to be overhauled and a light that needed to be changed. Use the documentation to find the wire, and from the wire find the cabinet and then find the fuse connected to the electric motor. Multitask and change the light as well. Then get the fancy logout-tagout order from the bridge. This was number 100 of the year, which seems to be very little in my opinion. Then when approved, turn off the power to the motor. Then practice work safety and always measure to be safe. Then start disconnecting bolts and taking everything apart. And when the wires are disconnected, put the bolts back so that you don't get ingression. Since this was such a heavy boy, you have to use the block chain to lift the electric motor and pull it sideways to rest on a bench or on the ground. Keep practicing workplace safety and wear gloves. Don't be like me. After a few tears and a few kisses from the ETO, continue with the work. Measure how deep the rotor has to go so that you know exactly how to put it back. And remove all the parts leading to the bearing, and then use the specialized tools to loosen the bearing itself also. After it's loosened, find the correct bearing in the storage and then warm it up to make it ready. When it's warm, then you can bang that baby back into place and then you can start on the other side. Since I put it back together, I don't have any footage, but this is basically the same process. As always, get the lockout-tagout from the bridge. Give that baby a few spins to take off the power. Really make sure to spin it all the way from connected to disconnected. Acknowledge the alarm so that the ship doesn't panic and think they're sinking. Always safety measure so that you don't die instantly when you touch it. Loosen the cables because there is a small electronics that can be destroyed by the test. Desired measurement is 2.2 megaohm. And when you are measuring something like this, it should never be under. When the measurements are done, then you have to put everything back together and use a special tool that limits the amount of force that you apply so you don't destroy everything because the copper is pretty sensitive. The next measurement didn't need to disconnect any wires because they were part of an open circuit. Lots of capacity in the wires, so pretty wild measurement but approved. And then just fill out the work order as always. After that it was time to sail out to Frederikshavn, and weather reports indicated that it was going to be a bumpy ride. I was quite sick and didn't get to video the wild seas because even standing cost me almost all of my energy. But after a nap I felt much better and was told I handled the rough seas very well for my first time. Then we had a fire drill with instructions from the chief officer, and we continued our travel to Denmark. Once we came to Frederikshavn, it was time to commence the dry docking. I will take you to the whole process before dry docking can be commenced from the electrician's side. What was going to happen now was that the ship had to black out before making the shore connection. First, you have to turn off the cathodic protection or the hull protection or ICCP, and this is because the ship is no longer submerged and doesn't need it, as well as that it poses a danger to those who are maintaining the hull. Then turn off the standby of the emergency generator because it must not activate once we are blacked out. And then I got the rather rare honor from the chief to black out the ship by switching off the last generator. Now only equipment protected by the UPS was still on and shore connection was about to take over. All those alarms, luckily we weren't on sea. Then shore connection was established and the shipyard wanted to go through the crane cables and not the actual shore connection because they needed 690 volts and the shore connection was set up to only 440 volts. Because I was busy with the other process, I wasn't there to observe the shore connection, but that work was performed by the shore electricians on the dock anyway and not the ETO. Then we needed to lock out all the thrusters and all the equipment that wasn't going to be used and walk up and down the stairs to the bridge to get the log-out tag-out for each and every one of them. I got some serious leg gains from this trip. And then when the ship was fully dry docked, we went for a peek under the hull. It was insanely huge and a very cool experience to observe. Here are the main thrusters of Volantis and the tunnel thrusters, and the hull protection. Observe the condition around the electrode. And here you have the navigation buoy. And once again, just seeing this giant underbelly was pretty awesome. Then upon returning to the ship, a non-planned blackout occurred. Too much equipment was being utilized and caused the breaker to switch. It was told that it was a maximum load of 900 ampere and it was long over. The chief turned on the emergency generator and after around 5 minutes the power was back. And then naturally I had to sprint up to the Monkey Island to turn off the emergency generator. After that, me and the ETO had to look around for equipment that was destroyed by the blackout process. And then I found this thing. I'll see you in my nightmares, Mr. Ropehead. We needed to lock out all of the switchboards connected to busbar 2 because of the Oskov yard people and they were going to completely replace it. We carefully isolated all of the equipment that no longer needed to be used and created bypasses to the ones to make this work. Unfortunately, the ship blacked out. And again, and once more. Until finally it was done right. Then one of the alarms notified that the sewage system was offline. Panic and mayhem as people couldn't flush their toilets. Honestly, this stresses people the hell out. So me and the ETO had to create a bypass directly from the power on the sewage system to the nearest 440 volt system, since everything in the purifier room was 690 volts. This took some work, but finally we pulled the cable to the cabinet and created a bypass to make the sewage work again. Unfortunately then, the wiring was incorrect and hopefully nobody flushed their toilets because they would operate more like a volcano than a vacuum. Once corrected, the system was working again and peace was established. Then we had to get around 16 logout tagouts for the entire right side of the switchboard room and then organize them neatly with the newly marked locks. To celebrate the end of the shift and Martin the DPO his birthday, we went and had dinner all together and socialized with live music. It was definitely a great time and I was very happy to have been with this crew. Here you see the crane operator having the time of his life. I spent the majority of the final time writing a handover which I would use for school and also to help Pavel who had limited English. Then one of the yard workers set off one of the call points by accident and we had to replace it. Simple process: program the new call point, find out which number on the diagram, replace it and use this key to arm it and voila. Important to communicate with the bridge and tell them so that they can acknowledge the alarms. You don't need to think about connecting any wires, you just have to floop it in. Then I got another tour of the outside of the ship, this time the bow, and even going under the ship, which was a pretty weird experience, and seeing where the swing-up thrusters used to be. And here are the aft thrusters in maintenance. And then the end got close. My personal opinion of working at sea: I never imagined this would be my life, but now I can't imagine anything else. I did get nauseous, I did feel frustrated when the waves knocked me over, and I did feel alone sometimes and miss my home and family. It's not a one-way street. You need to give up some comforts, but in return you get to be part of something bigger, learn valuable lessons, make friends, see beautiful places, and lay a good foundation economically for yourself and to build your future. I strongly recommend taking this route if the chance presents itself. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.